All right, Locker Room Philosophers fans, we are here with another hard-hitting episode. This will be episode 14 with Mario Santos and, of course, my co-host Mike D. Mike, how you doing today?
Doing great, Carlos. How you doing? Hey,
Doing all
Mario.
Awesome, boys. Doing great. Thank you guys for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
yeah, for sure. So Mario, um, I'm not going to summarize your background. You're going to do that for us. So let's start this out from the beginning. Where did you grow up, and what was growing up like?
Okay, for sure, man. Let's see. Born and raised Southwest Detroit, Henry Ford Hospital. I was born on the Boulevard. Lived in the city proper most of my life. Went to school in the suburbs, though. I went to Allen Park. Um, Growing up, let's see, man. I
Well,
mean,
what sibling were you? Are you the oldest, the youngest, the middle, only
I'm the
child?
oldest. Yeah, I got one younger brother.
Okay. And what's the age gap there?
5 years. Yeah, we got a little bit of a gap between us.
Okay. Did you have to do some kind of raising yourself there, or did you have both parents help you out with that?
Both parents were around for sure, and we had my grandmother, which we spent most of our time with. Both parents worked a lot, so spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house growing up. And she was on Morel, if you guys are familiar with that area of the city. But between
Okay.
uh, between Verner and Toledo is where I grew up, and off of 25th and Perry for a little bit too. And then we moved to Allen Park, and then basically just spent all of our summer times with my grandmother, after work with my grandmother, things like that. So very mixed upbringing. Went to school in the suburbs, but lived in the city. So like being a young kid, that was definitely different, but nothing bad, you know.
Talk to
Um,
us about growing up in the famous city of Detroit. And Southwest is, for people that don't know, Southwest is it's called Mexican Town, and Mario Santos is obviously not a white guy. Um, so it's a little bit different than the side of Detroit people normally think of. So talk to us a little bit about Southwest.
oh, for sure, man. Yeah, I'm Puerto Rican. My family's Puerto Rican. Yeah, Mexican town, Southwest. Let's see, man. I was born in '90. Um, I would say by the mid '90s, mid to late '90s, things started getting pretty wild with the gangs and things like that. Uh, the best way I can describe it is, man, everybody knows each other, right? Because you're growing up on this area with each other. But as you get older and guys start going certain ways with their lives, and it was very easy. Gangs were just everywhere, bro. Drugs, gang violence, that was very real and everywhere you turned. So for me, I don't want to jump too far ahead because we got a lot more to cover, like how I got into law enforcement and all that. But like I was raised by wolves, man. So my uncles and my father's a great man, but he's also the only man in my family who's never been to prison. So I got very lucky having the dad that I have and the mother that I have that kept us on a straight and narrow. And my uncles, I guess the best way I could describe them are like good dudes who did bad things. I mean, they were always good to us. But a few of them did, some pretty hard prison sentences. One for over a decade, and a few of them doing years here or there. So I grew up around drugs. They're drug dealers. I mean, without telling a whole life story, like you kind of you don't really know anything's wrong because that's what you're used to, right? So I guess like by the time I got to be about 10, 11 years old, I started to realize things were like, okay, they're in and out of jail, or you know, you seeing people like you see a lot of shit, right? So I've seen by the time I was 13 years old, I saw more nasty shit than most people would see in their lifetime, whether that be dead bodies, overdoses, things like that that most kids in a rough neighborhood just see every day. So that was one of those things, man. And then going to school in the suburbs with kids who had never been exposed to anything like that was kind of like I guess, culture shock for me for a bit for my childhood. I guess the best way I can describe it because it was just so different.
For sure. Let me back up for a sec. So did you, when you were 10, 11, however old, were you aware, like, okay, these cousins or uncles or whatever are going to prison, or was it framed to you as, oh, they're just like, they're away, like they're just not here? Or was it
It was a
known
bit
to
of
you?
both.
Okay.
It was a bit of both. Like our grandmother did her best, but it's an emotional time when somebody goes away, especially that they were her kids. So you just overhear the conversations because you're a kid, you're snooping in, right? So like, that you kind of figure out. And then at one point, I was actually in court watching one of my uncles get sentenced because my grandmother needed to be there. So,
Oh
and
yeah.
that was a short time for him though. But yeah, I remember that pretty vividly coming. And then it's obviously downtown, so Wayne County's got the jumper on and all that. Fast
Yeah.
forward a few years, I get to put guys in that, but you know,
Yeah. It is what it is. So what? I don't know if you've talked to your parents about this after the fact, but were they? What was their inspiration to not be about that life?
oh man, I would say, I've talked to my dad extensively about it. My mom, I think I never really got too much into it with her. I think my mom's just an extremely intelligent woman, and I think she just realized at a very young age that she was going to do better and be better. My dad had it very tough. He lost his father when he was 11, and he definitely lived a bit of a street life for a while. Um, by the time he made it to his early 20s, before he had me, it just turned into I'm going to work and get the hell out of here. And then my parents had me when they were 24, and once from what he tells me, like obviously when you have a kid, I just had my first son 6 months ago. It changes everything. My dad's like, when I held you for the first time, I knew that I didn't want to raise you around the same things that I was raised around or in the same way. So they got to work, and I had the privilege of going to school, and I went to school in Allen Park my whole life. We lived in the city, but it was, like I said, it was different. I had more than my cousins had, you know what I mean? And both my parents, they worked their ass off to give us the best life they possibly could.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad works for Ford, and my mom, I told her she needs to write a book. It's kind of funny you bring that up. She started off as a receptionist when she was 18 years old for this engineering company, and over the course of the next like 15 years, she worked her way up to vice president, and now she is the vice president of this multi-million-dollar engineering company that has offices in multiple states and
Nice,
all that really cool. She's got a really cool success story.
nice. That's cool. So how was it with your cousins? Were you guys like considered the yuppie, like privileged cousins, or how was that relationship with them?
Uh, Not really, because we were always there with each other.
Okay.
So my parents did like their best to. I mean, I would say that like my parents did their best to not dress us like too differently from them, or like I wasn't wearing Jordans and they were wearing Payless, things like that. You know what I mean? So it wasn't. We spent so much time with each other growing up that it wasn't too much of a difference. As we got to like our teenage years and things like that, I went to school in the suburbs and they were still in the neighborhood, so there was that difference. But no, we were all pretty close, man. We didn't really start drifting apart until later in life.
Okay. And then were you playing sports?
Oh yeah, my whole life, man. Football, basketball, baseball. My grandfather was a professional boxer, so that was kind of a that was just in the background my entire life. And I never got super into competing or anything like that, but I had the privilege of training with some pretty cool dudes, and I learned a thing or two along the way. One of my uncles was very good. Um, Somebody he probably could have really been somebody if he didn't get in trouble, but he taught me a lot. So
What was your favorite of those sports? Football, basketball, and baseball.
oh man, football's king for sure.
Yeah, you're not necessarily the most built for basketball, that's for sure.
Yeah, I know, man. I could jump though, so that helped a lot.
For sure. And then, at what point did you get into working out, or was it always for the sports?
I really got into lifting weights my freshman year of high school. I fell in love with lifting then. Got in, and Allen Park's a pretty big football town, so I was a halfway decent football player. So when I got in there, I had a really good coach who brought me into the weight room, and I fell in love with lifting. Training had always kind of been a part of it. I'd run with my uncle, and like hit the heavy bag and things like that. Situational training, especially boxing stuff. But then as I got older and got into high school, it really turned into like lifting, and I fell in love with it then.
For sure. And then, how were you in school?
Mediocre. I didn't really apply myself. I was the kid who passed all the tests with like super easily, but never did the homework. So I pissed off a lot of teachers. Show up, ace their test, and never turn in an assignment. So they just like, why don't you just do the homework? You'd have a 4 point. I'm like, I don't care, man. Just got to stay eligible.
For sure. And what was your plan for after high school?
Become a cop.
Okay, so what? Now we can get into that. What inspired the decision to go into law enforcement?
Oh man, I think there's a multitude of reasons, man, but definitely it's a calling. I felt that it was what I was called to do. I'm a Christian. I felt like God is like, this is what you're gonna do, and also the way I grew up. Uh, I had like a when I was younger, late teens, early 20s. I had like a legitimate hatred for like shitheads and evil things. You know what I mean? Like I watched all the pain my grandmother went through from watching her sons fuck up, and it never made me resent them personally, but it made me. I knew that I was not going to put my parents or her through that type of pain, and I was going to do something better. So I chose the polar opposite, right?
Did you have many interactions with the police at that point?
No, I a couple of times because you're growing up in the neighborhood, you're going to run into them every now and again. Unfortunately, just like any ghetto policing, man, like the couple interactions I had with them weren't pleasant. You know what I mean? I was riding my bike uh, up to Holy Redeemer. They had outside basketball courts over there, right? And I got rolled up by I probably 30 series dudes if I had to guess now that I've been on the job for a while, who were just like, hey man, where'd you steal that bike? I was like, my dad got me this for my birthday. They're like, bullshit. So they roused me for that or whatever. And I told them, I was like, no man, like my dad literally like, and the one two was like, you ain't got no daddy, and they rolled off. So like I was like, okay man, well fuck the police, right?
Yeah, that can definitely make you feel that way for sure. So none of that persuaded you to go the other way, or did your family? What did your family think about it?
Um, I think at first it was probably a little bit of a shock to everybody that I was going to choose that path. I think they probably thought I was going to go the military route, which I talked about a lot. But like I said, I felt like I was called to go into law enforcement, so I went off to college to start that journey. But my uncles were extremely supportive of it. At this time they had all been, I guess what you call reformed, and they're all living better lives now or whatever. But like there was they were super the ones that I spoke to and I was in close contact with who I looked up to, they were like, yeah man, that's awesome. You're gonna do something better for your life, regardless of what you grew up around. My dad I think was always proud. My mom proud, a little scared probably, but I wasn't met with too much, at least not to my face. Later on, like as my career progressed and things like that, I think some of my cousins had some resentment towards me or something like that. But I also separated myself from my family because you know how it is when you're on the job kind of becomes your life, and then you hang around other dudes on the job, and I had cousins who were doing dumb shit, and I was, well, I'm not going to be around that if like you guys, and I had to work all the holidays anyway when I would see them regardless. So if you're working Christmas and Thanksgiving and all the other stuff like I did for 10 years, you're not going to see them anyway. So it just kind of turned into that. But I wasn't really met with any negativity like crazy, at least.
For sure. And then where'd you go off to college?
Just schoolcraft in Livonia. Like I got started there and I did like a couple semesters, and then I dropped out, and then I just went to work. I worked I was delivering pizzas for Jets Pizza. I did that for a while. Uh, did a bunch of security work. I did a little bouncing for a little bit. Then I went to work for Wow Cable Company. I did that for a little bit. And then at 21, a buddy of mine moved to Virginia, and that's how I ended up there. He got a job with Chesterfield County, just outside of Richmond there. And they were paying guys to go through the academy. If you got hired in, you got paid all the way through the academy. And at that time, Michigan wasn't doing anything like that. There really wasn't any sponsorships since 2011. So now there's people. I mean, obviously, law
Yeah,
enforcement has changed tremendously. So you can get sponsored through the academy pretty quick nowadays. But back then, so that's how I ended up going to Virginia. I applied, and I never thought I'd leave the state of Michigan. It was probably the best decision I ever made was to get out of here for a while. But I applied, got hired, and then academy down there was long, dude, 7 months because it was law enforcement and corrections.
Okay.
So it was a long academy, paramilitary. It was a kick in the teeth for sure. I had a lot of respect for those guys. They ran a very difficult academy, and so it was good. Learned a lot.
All right.
What was
Before
the
we,
what was the benefit of moving away from Michigan?
I think, man, especially being a young man, you got to leave the nest, right? So you got to start to build your own. And for me, like having the freedom to, because I still lived with my parents when I left. I was working full time, but I was still living at home. So I had, so when I moved away, I moved like 700 miles away instead of just down the street, you know. So it's character building, man. I mean, when you're down there and like, you get paid every 2 weeks, and now you got to stretch this $30 in your account for the next 4 days because you're young and dumb and you spent all your money. Mommy and daddy can't. There was no Venmo,
Mhm.
right?
Right,
So there
right.
wasn't like, you're just stuck, dude. So you're eating bologna sandwiches or ramen or whatever. That shit builds character. I think that was important for me to learn how to pay bills, do that on my own, and there's just it's just a growing experience, And then on top of it, you're going through I was never in the military, so I'm going through this paramilitary academy, and I'm by myself living alone. And I have a buddy there, but he's already graduated and he's working, so I don't see him often. So you're getting your dick kicked in every day, and you come home and you got to press your uniforms and do all that shit to shine your boots and all that for the next day, and you're just sitting there thinking, holy shit, what I get myself into, man. So that was good, but yeah, getting out of there, man. Like I think everybody should leave home at least for a little bit and explore and see what else is out there. For it's just I learned a ton about myself, and also that weather's way nicer than it is here. The sun
most
shines a little
definitely,
different on the East Coast, man. Like it was cool.
for sure. So backing it up a little bit, you said you were working these kind of odd jobs for a few years in between.
Hmm.
How was it? Like, did your mind ever kind of switch as to, I'll just like do this stuff instead of being a cop, or was your goal always set on the being a cop thing?
No, it definitely for a little bit. I think that when I got into working for the cable company, they hit you with the benefits and the 401 and all that, and I never minded hard work, so it was a steady, guaranteed 40 hours a week, and I could see very easily how people could just give up on certain things for that comfort. But always in the back of my mind, man, I could always hear that calling, like, nah, this isn't enough. You're meant for more than this. You got to do more than this. And that's no knock on guys who do it by any means, but for me personally, I had to do more.
For sure. And so the decision making process for going down to Virginia, it was just, all right, they're going to pay me, or had you been looking at departments in Michigan? Like I know DPD,
Mhm.
they pay through the academy, state police. Did you ever look at those, or was it?
Yeah, I filled out the what was it, the interest card for DPD. That's what it was back in the day. I can't remember. There was a little card you filled out, and they interviewed me on like the spot. But I think I was like 19 at the time because they said you could apply at 18. I didn't do any research. I was a dumb kid, and I was working at Kentucky Fried Chicken at the time. And the guy got the biggest kick out of that, man. Dude sits me down. He's a salty old vet, and I got the card filled out or whatever. And he's going over it or whatever. And he's looking at me, and I had no idea that I was going to sit down in front of somebody for kind of like a little interview. So I'm just in a t-shirt and jeans, which was another dumb kid mistake. And he sits me down. He's looking me up and down. I got Timberland boots on and baggy jeans. And this dude, he's reading my card, and he's like, Mario Santos. And he's like, where are you from, man? And I'm like, I graduated from Allen Park High School. He goes, no, you ain't from Allen Park, though. Where are you from? I was like, I grew up in Southwest, man, but I mean, I'm from Allen Park too. It's kind of it's a weird story, right? And the guy's like, all right, whatever, man. Like, I thought you were from the hood. So I'm trying not to laugh, and then he's like, you're working at Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'll never forget the way he said it, man. So I started laughing, and he was like, all right, man. He goes, you're only 19. You got to come back later. But I like you. And that was the extent of it. I never heard anything back from him.
Damn, they missed out for sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
but so you go down to Virginia, and I'm familiar with Chesterfield County for sure. That was the neighboring agency to where I used to work.
Right, right.
And so talk to us about working in a little arrest field.
Yeah, man. So I went down. I worked for the sheriff's office, man. So when I got out of the academy, we went straight to the jail. So I spent
Okay,
2 years
actually,
working
hold
in the.
on. Hold on. Let me explain to people how Virginia law enforcement works. So,
Oh yeah, here
in
we go.
I worked for the city of Richmond, and so in Virginia, it's not like how it is in Michigan, where you're either you are a city that can be in a county. For example, like Detroit is in Wayne County. In Virginia, you're either a city, so Richmond, or you're a county, so Chesterfield. So cities are in counties. So in Virginia, like for example, Chesterfield County, they've got Chesterfield County Police, which they do the roads, like they do normal police stuff that you think of. But then Chesterfield County Sheriff's Office just does the jail. So Richmond, weirdly enough, as a city, we had Richmond PD, which is again who I worked for, and then there was also Richmond City Sheriff's Office. So they just did the jail and the courts. So Mario saying that he worked for the sheriff's office in Chesterfield County, which you guys wore. That was like the black and gray, right? Or black and
Yeah,
silver.
brown. It was like no, it was they might be now, but back then it was brown and tan pants, dude.
Okay. Yeah.
And we had
Now
the
they're
sheriff Woody hats.
now they're black and silver, and then the PD is they've got the green uniforms.
Yeah, they were in the PD was in the green back then too. They look pretty dope.
Yeah, except the hats. They had a weird hat
Dude,
situation
the hats were
going.
terrible.
All right,
Absolutely terrible.
so I've never worked in a jail. Talk to us about that. I can't even imagine working in a jail. That would be pretty
Oh man.
awful.
Yeah, you worked in Richmond, so you knew the clientele we dealt with, right? So like
I
we
was
had some
intimately
dangerous dudes,
familiar.
man.
The
Yeah, we had some
clientele.
dangerous dudes, man. So it was eye opening, to say the least, bro. It's everything you think it would be. You know, it's a county jail, so I tell people it was literally just training grounds for prison. You had some guys who were going in there and they were getting themselves ready to go sit down for a long time, and other dudes who were like there for child support. So you had everything in between, all the, you know what I mean. So you could go from I dealt with straight up killers, big time drug dealers, rapists, all the way down to the dude who's just annoying as shit because he hadn't paid his baby mama in a few months. You know, so you dealt with all of it, and honestly, the hardened felons were the easiest ones to deal with, as long as they weren't trying to kill you. You know, like that. That's a different story. But for the most part, day to day operations, those dudes understood that if they were just pretty chill, then you would leave them alone. They would leave you alone. You know, like it's very simple. All they have, man, is respect, right? So if like you treat them with a little bit of respect, they give it back to you pretty much tenfold. But it's you got to earn it too, though. You know what I mean? Just because you got the badge, they don't give a fuck about that. You know what I mean? And then they tear people up, man, verbally, and you know, like they guys, you'll find out real quick if you're training a guy in the jail whether or not he's ever going to survive on the street, because these dudes, they light them up, man. And if you can't figure out how to deal with that and fire it back at them and learn how to walk amongst wolves, for lack of a better term, you're gonna get eaten alive, and you're never gonna survive 12-hour shifts over and over again. You know.
For sure. So I'm guessing we're going to cover this on the later aspects of your law enforcement career, but specifically talking about the jail part, what do you think when people say like, "Oh, you need to, talk to people that you're dealing with when you're wearing the badge. You need to talk to them like, like you're talking to your mom or whatever. Like, talk to them super respectful, and you know, how do you think, or what do you think about that?"
Oh, like them, like people outside of law enforcement trying to tell cops that they should speak to people that way, like speak to criminals that way, or just
Yeah. Like
okay,
how,
yeah,
for example, yeah. So for example, like for me, it's like they don't realize that if you talk to some killer in like, "Sir, can you please do this?" Like they don't
right,
listen. They don't listen to that. So let's
yeah,
hear
no,
your take on that.
yeah, no. I mean, you have to speak to people in ways that they're going to understand you. So you have to be able to change your diction to your audience. Period. That's law enforcement 101 in my opinion. If you are working the street and you got to talk to a 65-year-old lady who just had her identity stolen because you're working in the suburb and that's a report you got to take, you're going to speak to her in a certain way. Especially if she's an older, we'll say white woman who's lived in this nicer neighborhood for upwards of 50, 60 her entire life. She doesn't have the exposure that you might have in your professional career or in your personal life. Versus how you're going to talk to somebody if you're working the East Side, you have to speak to them in a way that they understand, right? So it's like it comes down to respect, absolutely. But if I'm sirring somebody who doesn't, they've never heard, like, why would I be like, I don't. You can't just be like, sir, excuse me, sir, I need to talk to you for a minute, sir. It doesn't work that way, man. Like, that dude's gonna look at you like, get the fuck out of my face, bro. Like, so I think people that say that have never done the job, obviously, or if they did do the job, they never did it in an area where they were dealing with a certain type of element, a criminal element. And yeah, man, it's stupid. You know, people Monday morning quarterback stuff like that, and you have admin that does it too. You know what I mean? The guys that have been off the street, the guys you work for, they're like, oh, I don't like that you use that language. Well, that guy understood exactly what I was saying, and we had a good conversation because I spoke to him in a way that he could understand. And he was like, "Yeah, man, I respect you. I'll fuck with you, bro. Like, I'll go with you." You know, I mean, I've talked hundreds of people into handcuffs just because I know how to talk to people without having to fight them, without having to put hands on them, without, you know what I mean? Like, there's a time and a place. Don't get me wrong, where there is no talking. We all know that. But if you can speak to people in a way that they understand you, and you can change your diction to your audience, and you're smart enough to see that and pivot and move quickly through those situations, you'll be just fine. But you can't. It's not a one size fit. To answer your question, it's not one size fits all. And I'm not going to talk to anybody like how I would talk to my mother, right? Because it's that's your mother, bro. Like, you know, I think it's ridiculous.
For sure. So, tell us about kind of just lessons you learned about yourself at Chesterfield and how that was, your first job, your first kind of big boy job, and
Yeah.
especially in law enforcement. Tell us what you learned about yourself.
Oh man, I learned that no matter where you come from, how you grew up, what you who you are, that doesn't matter. You put that uniform on, you are now one of them. There is no there is no I'm just a kid from the hood like you. There is none of that. You have to find common ground in other ways, and you have to earn their respect. They don't care about the badge. You're just another rookie. Um, and you earn respect by your actions. Doing what you say you're going to do, sticking to it, that is massive, especially working in a jail. If you tell one guy, no, I'm not doing this thing. And then you go and an hour later, another dude in the same pod asks you for something similar or the same thing and you do it. Now your word means nothing. And vice versa. You tell a guy you're going to do something for him and you don't do it. Now your word means nothing, right? It could be something as simple as taking him to yard or letting that dude go do his laundry. Super simple stuff. But people forget, like, you're dealing with these dudes and they're locked down. They only have like these limited resources, right? So when they ask you for a certain thing and they're cool with you and you tell them you're going to do it, just do it. Be a man of your word. I learned that for sure. Pay attention. Uh,
What did you learn about yourself?
I would say I learned that I could. I learned that I could talk to anybody. I was never much of a talker, especially growing up, and I was a pretty hot-headed kid. So I learned how to develop skin like leather, because they talk mad shit to you, and this isn't the street. You're held to a higher standard. You can't just start throwing hands with everybody. And there's dudes in there you don't want no part of throwing hands with, man. You got a 6'5" dude who's 250 pounds. You know what? I'm a tough guy, man, but like I'm not trying to find out today if I don't have to. So you learn how to talk to people. I learned about myself that, uh, man, that's a tough question. I don't know why it's such a tough question, but making me think back. Um, I think I think that I really learned that I was built for that type of work. I was good at it. I knew I had throughout the course of that time in a short period of time, I had built the trust of my peers, and I think what I learned about myself is like, fuck yeah, man, this is what you were put here to do. Like, you got bigger things coming, going to the road and all that, but like being a cop, that this is you. I think that would probably be the one takeaway I would take from my first few months to a couple years on the job.
Okay. And then, so now, even down there, you can get hired directly to the road. So, did you need to work the jail first at that point?
Yeah, for the sheriff's office. So my own fault. I didn't do tremendous research. The sheriff's office didn't work the road at that time. But you went to the police academy and you're LE certified and you go through everything that the PD went through. But you just go to the jail and then the courts, right? And like, so I didn't. I'm grateful for it because working that jail taught me. It made me a better road cop, better street cop, 100 times over. But yeah, no, I had no idea. So if I could, if if I went back or whatever, I would apply to the PD because I had no intention of working in a jail. But I learned a ton. So I'm grateful for that time I spent doing it for sure.
Okay.
And I also
So,
learned I didn't want to do it for longer than I did do it.
yeah. So, what was the decision making process to get to the road?
I came back home to Michigan. I
No,
was looking for
I
the.
mean, hold on. Did you ever work for Chesterfield County PD, or were you always with the sheriff's office? Okay.
I was with the sheriff's office for the 2 years I was down there.
Okay. All right. So then the decision to come back to me. It seems like everybody that moves away comes back. So I mean, I did the same thing. So
Yeah, dude. I actually, to be completely honest with you, I had zero intention of coming back. But I have my younger brother we spoke about earlier. He got his girlfriend pregnant while he was in high school, so my niece was born. And I'm big on family. I wanted to be a part of her life, so that really rooted my decision to come back to Michigan. My goal was Florida. I wanted to like work for Miami-Dade PD or somewhere along those lines. Head down that way and enjoy the sunshine and chase bad guys down there.
you would probably not be the only Mario Santos working for
Oh, dude,
Miami
yeah.
Dade.
I know, seriously, man. I have to learn Spanish too because I'm a Detroit Puerto Rican, bro. I don't speak any Spanish, so the guys would always try to talk Spanish to me, and I couldn't. I was uh, I don't got anything for you, bro.
All right, so you come back home. Your brother had a kid. What was the was the whole decision making process for coming back then?
Yeah, man. It made it. It was pretty clear cut at that point for me. I was like, all right, I'm gonna find a department back home and come back and be around for that.
Okay, so talk to us about coming back home. You don't need to name the departments if you don't want to.
Yeah, I'll leave him. I'll leave him out because you know I don't want them sending you guys like a cease and desist or something like that. But I go back. I go back 2014, and department. I see a department is hiring or whatever. It was actually my grandmother that saw it on TV. She called my mom, who called me. I put in the application. I got hired, and I had to work in their jail because I had to transfer all my certifications over from Virginia to Michigan, and they also had an education requirement. I didn't have my associate's degree. So I had to go back to school. I'm working midnights in their jail after I get off their training program for their jail because I had 2 years of experience already. They shot me out. I was on my own for like a couple months, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to train people for us?" I'm like, "All right, sure, man." So I'm training their new officers in the jail while I'm doing midnight classes at Schoolcraft again, online classes there, right? So and we were on 8 hour shifts at that department at the time, so you're working just stupid hours. It sucked. But I go through all that, uh, take the Michigan test. I got all my stuff transferred, a bunch of paperwork with the state and all that bullshit. Get all that stuff transferred, take the Michigan test, pass that, and cleared to go to the road. But they're like, you got to finish your degree before we put you on the road. So I continued doing that. So long story short, it took me 15 months to make it to the road, but I did it, and it was a bitch. But 15 months training people there. One of my buddies, who's a detective there now, every now and again he'll fuck with me and he'll be like, "Don't you miss being a half off trainer because you got like it was a significant pay increase when you went to the road?" So he's like, "No, they just had you training all their guys for half off, dude." I'm
Yeah,
like, "Yeah, that's probably part of their plan." But
it sounds like that department for sure.
yeah, it was, dude. Yeah, love the dudes I worked with, man. I worked with some great guys, but at the very top, and that admin was, yeah, it was terrible.
That sounds like how it tends to go. But so tell us about kind of what you learned during that time when you're. I mean, because that honestly takes a decent amount of mental strength right there to just be like, all right, I'm gonna stick with this department and go to school and also be working full time in the jail. And then I got to train these idiots how to do
Yeah,
this job that I've been doing for a while. So talk to us kind of about what you learned about yourself and kind of mental toughness there. Because I mean,
for
I,
sure.
I wasn't a cop in 2014, but I'm sure you could have found a place that you didn't need to do all that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, there was everybody was I could have went wherever. That particular department when I went there, they had an excellent reputation, big department. So that's why I chose it in the first place. But I think what I could say I learned is that there's no quitting me. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, and it just as bad as it sucked in some nights, having this, you're up all night. I'm trying to teach this kid who's fresh out of the academy how to talk to some fucking criminal and take control of a situation while I got my sociology report is due. You know what I mean? So like, I think what I learned is just resilience, dude. Like, just don't quit. It's gonna come. It's gonna take some time, but you'll never get there if you fucking quit. So just suck it up and keep grinding, and good things will come from it. But delayed gratification, that's something people love to say, but many people don't live it. I've lived delayed gratification many times in my life. I'm living it right now in this season of my life. And you just stick with it, man. And sometimes you got to cowboy the fuck up and just get shit done. And people like to whine and bitch and complain and woe is me. Like being a victim is the cool thing to be nowadays, right? Like it's I think that's just bullshit. And I'm sure guys like you, the reason you're doing what you guys are doing is because you think it's bullshit too. Like the world's yours for the taking, man. You just got to be willing to fucking grind it out. I think that's probably the one thing I learned about going through all of that, being stuck on midnights and dealing with all the shit that you got to deal with interdepartmentally, and then finishing school and all that shit.
For sure. So, talk to us about getting on the road. That was sounds like at least close to 4 years into the job for you.
Yeah, dude, it was like just over 3 years. Yeah. Yeah, 3 years total, including academy time, whatever. Yeah, about 3 years in. Oh, it was great, man. I got promoted to the road. And it made everything worth it, right? My round one FTO was a dude that I got to know pretty well from my time working in the jail, and we worked out together and stuff like that. We just very similar interests, and he was a solid ass street cop. So phase one was a breeze. Uh, phase two sucked because the guy I rode with was just a total fucking pussy, and he was an asshole, dude, and so it sucked. We didn't get along too well, and I've always been a good soldier, man. I follow orders and I do what I need to do and keep my mouth shut because that's the way you make it through FTO and that's the way you make it. You do what you got to do. But if I disagree with something morally or ethically, I'm going to speak on it. So not that the guy was doing anything like that, but it's all that particular department is all about numbers. Take people to jail for absolute bullshit, and I didn't believe in that. I didn't police that way. My mentality was there's somebody out there doing something bad, I'm going to go find them. I don't give a shit about the guy with the suspended license, and I don't care about your speeding tickets. So that made working there difficult for me overall because I never lost that mentality. I never, I refused to play their game, in order to get where I wanted to go in the department. So it caused me some grief, but I could go to sleep at night every night without knowing I wasn't fucking over people that may have deserved a second chance.
So, what was actually, let's touch on that. So, what do you think drove that mentality? Because a lot of cops will just, all right, admin wants me to be writing some tickets. I'll just knock those out. So, tell us about what kind of drove you to be a little different in that regard.
I think obviously personal experience, my life, the way I grew up, uh, I looked at policing from a different lens because I understood that there was a lot of bad happening out there and it's everywhere. So let's try and find it. Why am I going to waste my talents and my resources on writing soccer moms speeding tickets or locking up dudes that drive a fucking beat up car that are already down on their luck trying to make it to their second shift at Walmart, but they have a suspended license and maybe a little bit of weed on them before now weed is legal, but back then it was still illegal, and it was like I had what good was I doing? You know what I mean? So I made the stops. I did what I needed to do. I was always hunting, but I wasn't. It wasn't about numbers to me. These are people. They're not stats. So I treated every single stop, every time I was investigating somebody as an individual person. and I would just be like, I would try and treat it as just like, yo, is this dude a criminal and I have a reason to take him to jail, so I should take him for this misdemeanor because he's out here doing some real bad shit, but I haven't caught him doing that? Or is this dude just a guy who's got pictures of his kids in his wallet and he's just trying to make a living and he's down on his luck and he doesn't have insurance on his car and he's got a few suspensions on his license? I think a lot of cops look at it so black and white. Like you just said, admin wants me to write these tickets. Admin wants me to bring these small fish to jail. Let me just go ahead and do that. This guy is breaking the law, so let me just, like, I'm not in the wrong here. I just didn't look at it that way, and sometimes people just, you've already stopped them. You got them out of the car. They're in handcuffs, and they're being cool with you. And they're like, "Yeah, man. I mean, I don't have it. I don't do anything. I don't. They don't have any warrants. They don't have all this. So why am I going to take them to jail for a traffic offense?" I never understood that. You know.
For sure. What was your I'm a cop now moment? Like it might have happened in the jail, but at the moment, what was the moment where you're like, somebody needs me to do something, or somebody needs
Mm-hmm.
a cop to do something, and I guess that's
Yeah.
me, so I need to step up right now. What was that moment
Right
for
on.
you?
That's a good question, dude. Let me think for a quick second. I think I probably felt the "I'm a cop now" thing. Like, oh man, I definitely felt like I was part of the brotherhood when I was working in the jail. Some like business needed to be handled, certain like cell extractions, or fighting guys in booking, things like that. I definitely felt like I was part of the brotherhood. I'd earned some respect from the older guys that had trained me. So I definitely felt like I was part of it then. But like really just, man, it's hard to narrow down one moment. I remember my first like P-Wid lockup where I got a bunch of dope, bunch of crack, bunch of heroin.
So
Um,
well, let me back it up. PWID is possession with intent to distribute, so dealing
oh
drugs.
yeah, sorry, I forgot. Yeah, drugs. Guys out here moving weight. No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't that much, but it was a good amount, right? So off of a traffic stop, and I remember getting the guy out, whatever, and I hook him up. I'm searching him, and because he's got some weed in the center console, right? So I'm like, "Hey man, how much weed you got on you?" He's like, "Oh, I just got this right here." I'm like, "All right, cool, bro. Just step out real quick." But he had a weird feeling about him, so I was, let me holler at this dude real quick. So I bring him out. I hook him up. I'm searching him, and I go in his pocket, right? And I feel he's got a couple of like loose crack rocks in his pocket. So I love telling this story just because people laugh at it. I literally in the middle of searching him, I pull it out. It's in my hand. I hit him with the Denzel from Training Day. I was like, "Oh, you lied to me." And people crack up at that. Dude, I remember watching the tape later. And my sergeant was like, "Did you hit him with the Denzel, man?" I'm like, "I had to, bro. It just came out." So when I'm searching the car, man, I end up finding like a big bag just full of rock and heroin. And he had like, you guys, I don't know if you remember the Fruity Pebble dope that it looked like Fruity Pebble cereal, but they were
Yeah,
putting heroin in it, whatever, and trying. He had some of that too.
nice.
But it ended up being a pretty good pinch, and I was still like new to the road, so like that was probably my first big drug pinch. And I got some guns, and like then I was kind of in my own groove, So I was I'm pretty good at this shit.
So was that the moment when you were like, okay, this is why I got into this job, or was there a different
Yeah,
scenario that happened when you were like, yeah, this is what I signed up for this for?
yeah, for sure, man. I think just being out there doing it every day. I think there were certain days where I was just like, yeah, man, fuck yeah, this is why. Just being out doing it, right? Especially because it took me so long to get to the road. Finally, I had a journey to get there. So like being out there on my own and policing the way that I wanted to police, that I felt was the most effective. But I think that there was definitely certain calls just throughout the rookie part of my career where it was you got to help somebody or chase somebody down or something, and and you're just like, yeah, fuck yeah, this is many of those fuck yeah moments where you're like, this is why we do this shit.
For sure. And at what point did you start training? Was it at that department or training jujitsu and getting more serious about your training outside of the job for the
Yeah,
job?
man, it was in that department. Or I went out to a gym. I spent a short period of time there. I trained jujitsu for probably about less than a year, the entire time I was in law enforcement. Which the schedule, man. Like I know, and it's a gripe a lot of cops have. It was very difficult to find a school that I could go to on either on the days I worked or on my days off, scheduling just was it was tough, man. But we at that department we had a mat room, and one of my buddies was like a purple belt, so I trained with him just constantly. So it was I got to get some really good work in, and I had the boxing background, so like he came from he's an MMA guy, so we got to exchange striking stuff together, and he's one of my best friends to this day. But yeah, no, yeah, combat sports has always been a big part of my training. Even just training alone, hitting the bag and things like that. I've just like shooting on your own as a cop. It's a perishable skill, just like fighting. You have to be working it. But I got
For sure.
super into jujitsu the last couple years.
Okay. And so we'll get to that for sure. But do you, what do you think the place is, or what place do you think training should have for cops?
It's a complete necessity. I think that we have failed our nation's law enforcement tremendously with the level of training that we give them. I was a defensive tactics and subject control instructor for 8 years. Um, Firearms instructor. On paper, I look all cool, right? Like secret squirrel ninja shit, right? All my certifications, but it's all trash. Like not all of it, but most of it isn't tremendously effective, especially in certain everyday scenarios. I mean, I'm no tier 1 guy. I can't teach people how to shoot like that, but I can run a pistol and rifle. You know, like I know how to run those weapon systems. Um, as far as teaching defensive tactics, subject control, and what the curriculum is for law enforcement, it's an absolute joke. And I think that hashtag BJJ make it mandatory. I think that grappling is a massive part of the job. You don't haul off and punch people that often, so my boxing skills didn't get put to use all that often. Now, defensively, when somebody would swing on me and you got some drunk dude swinging on you and you know how to stop linear strikes, let alone some drunken haymaker, well, that's like, yeah, okay, buddy, now you just stepped into my world. I love this. Thank you for doing that. Then every now and again, you come across a dude who really knows how to fight and he swings and you're like, oh, we got some work to do, man. But if you don't have that background, you're going to get knocked the fuck out, or hurt really bad. So yeah, no, it's atrocious the level of training once a year, to go through one day of defensive tactics and, straight armbar takedowns and handcuffing and all that stuff. It's no, man, every cop should train jujitsu. Make sure you clip that. Every cop should train jujitsu for sure.
Why do you think that, especially being in the nature of the work that they do, how come it is like so if I'm a cop, if I'm putting myself out in potential danger every time I'm on the clock, like I would want to I'm thinking about myself at least. I'm going to want to train and make sure I'm, sharp, that much better. I'm interacting with potential violent, people. So I feel like, is it, is it kind of like the department doesn't, is it kind of a fear of, I don't want to get injured outside of what I'm allowed to do, or what the department kind of sets up the training, and anything outside of that might jeopardize like income for me, or is it just like they don't want to
Yeah.
train?
I think you definitely have a mixture of all three things you just said. It's a case by case basis for each officer. Some of it comes down to pure laziness. They
Okay.
don't want to train. Some of it comes down to ego. I am proficient enough as I stand. So you'll meet a lot of guys who are in tremendous shape, whether they are just weightlifters, crossfitters, avid, whatever. I've worked with cops who are in tremendous shape. And some of them inherently are athletic enough and physically capable enough to fight pretty well, even not having any general training, or even like a good high school wrestler. You got a guy who wrestled most of his life or whatever. It's perishable by all means, but he knows a lot more than your average everyday shitbag, right? So I think ego plays a role too. Like I'm good enough the way I am. If I stay in good physical condition, I can handle myself. And then you start winning some of these altercations that you're in with relative ease, that can get in the way too. I know that even for myself, like there was times in my career in my 20s where my dad just told me that I thought I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof because that's how I acted. You know what I mean? So ego can play a tremendous role. And for anybody who sees this and like you think that, like I can tell you right now, you're fucking wrong. Like, no matter how bad you think you are, dude, and how skilled you are and how good a shape you're in, you're going to come across somebody who is going to be better. And if they have a skill set they choose to do bad with, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Like most guys who are martial artists are pretty humble, really good dudes, man. I've trained with a bunch of guys who are just really good guys, but every now and again you come across a guy who's a bad motherfucker, and he's going to use it for bad. And if you try to put that dude in handcuffs, it's not going to go your way. So, and also too, just before I forget, because I'm trailing off, what you said about the scope of what they're allowed to do, that definitely, especially in like the early, 2000 teens, when we were training jujitsu and the department heard about it, they didn't like it. So and my buddy who I trained with, he is also an instructor. They didn't like it, and they're like, we don't want any of that Gracie shit. Is a quote from one of our captains, right? So we weren't allowed to teach it. We weren't, and then they just didn't like it. And they thought that like we were just bruisers, like, oh, these guys are both MMA guys and they just want to beat the shit out of people. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Like my buddy and I won't say his name because he's still on the job, but we had the least amount of use of forces. Every use of force we got into was completely necessary. There was no talking. You know what I mean? And so it's just that archaic thinking. Lifting weights is enough. And don't get me wrong, bro. I lift weights every day. I love it. But it's you have to be proficient at violence.
Mhm.
I mean, there's no way around that. You know what I mean? Like, and the more proficient, especially in grappling, the more proficient you are at jujitsu, the less violence you have to use. I mean, I've trained. There's guys that I roll with that make me feel like a toddler, and they're smiling at me when they do it. You know what I mean? And it's like Jocko Willink said, man, jujitsu is a superpower, and he's not lying. Especially in the law enforcement world, if you are even just a good grappler, like if you're a decent guy in your gym, you are going to handle 99% of the population with relative ease. And I think if guys would train like they do for DOPSCOP to the blue belt level, if you're a proficient blue belt, I think that's wonderful. I don't think you should stop there. I think that if you're bitten by the jiu-jitsu bug, you're going to keep going regardless. But it would be wonderful in a perfect world to get everybody, every cop in this nation trained to 6 months to a year of almost proficient blue belt level. It would be fantastic. But yeah, man, I think ego, money. They complain about, oh, it costs $120 a month or whatever. I don't got time for that. But you'll spend $400 at the bar on Friday night, right? It's all about what is important to you. But money, ego, department doesn't want you to do it. I think that's changing now. I've been out of the game for a couple of years now, but I would say, judge from my buddies, they're like, no, they're starting to lean, especially with like EFC, and Wads and those guys, what they're doing and what Mike has, those guys are doing is awesome. So I think departments are opening their eyes because, senseless shootings and things that are escalating when a simple takedown and some control would, if you just gift wrap a guy and get on your prep, like, you're going to be you're going to be all right. But yeah, money, ego, time, it was difficult back then. That was my excuse. At least I could have done better for sure. But
For sure. So, what was the decision making process to go and lateral to the next department?
oh man, that department they were trying to end my career. They had placed me on my second PIP, and for your people following, a performance improvement plan. So I had got one when I was in FTO for lack of playing the game with the numbers and the arrests, the misdemeanor arrests, and then I had been there for like 4.5 or 5 years, almost 5 years, and they hit me with another one, and that one was like 6 months long. They made me ride with a supervisor. Um, I had to do weekly visits with my supervisor that went over my numbers every week. They counted every traffic stop I made, every ticket I wrote, every arrest I made. And when they wrote it in there, when they gave it to me, they were like, if you don't pass this PIP, we're going to fire you. You will be let go if you don't pass this. So I was on the union, like I was, whatever. They thought I was a meathead, smarter than I look. So I played the game. I got through it. I passed it. And then I left. Long story short, I beat them at their own game twice, is what I told them on the way out. So you guys thought you had me, you didn't. I'm out.
For sure.
But
And
I wasn't
what
going to let them take my career away from me, man. I loved being a cop far too much to just let them either fire me or take it away from me. You know what I mean? Because of their bullshit ways.
For sure. And what drew you to that next apartment?
Oh man, I
Or
had go ahead, bro.
yeah, what made you pick that next apartment?
To be brutally honest, I had no desire to work there. I lived in the city, and so I lived in the city, loved it. Well, I'll just say it. I went to Allen Park. The good, great dudes. Whatever. That was the department I left out of after my tenure there. But I lived in the city. I had a house in the city, and I obviously went to high school there. I had no desire to police that city. You know, it was kind of like Mayberry, right? It's a pretty safe town. I had really no desire for it. I had applied to neighboring jurisdiction from the previous one, made it all the way through, and they go to hire me, and somehow, some way, they didn't realize I didn't meet their education requirement, so I didn't get hired after going through all of it, the background, everything. The guy calls me, and he's the coolest dude ever, and he's like, "Man, I'm so sorry," and I'm like, "Dude, you guys told me you were hiring me. Like this department I work for that wants to fire me knows I am in your process. Like they're chomping at the bit to like get rid of me. You know what I mean? Like they will fire me as soon as I get into anything here. They're gonna if they can fire me, they will." And the guy's like, "I'm so sorry, man." He was a really cool dude, but yeah, it got missed in the background. But I mean, God's got a plan, right? So I ended up applying to Allen Park. A really good buddy of mine worked there, so I hit him up. He was in Chiefs unit at the time, the narco unit, and I hit him up. I was like, "Yo, dude, I heard you guys are hiring." He goes, "Yeah, we're looking to hire too." And I was, "I'm coming over, man." He goes, "Are you serious?" He'd been trying to get me there for years. And "I'm telling you, man, come on, come on, come on." So I apply, whatever, and I was hired like 2 months later. Went super quick.
Nice. And just some foreshadowing. If you'd gone to the department you were trying to go to, you wouldn't have met your wife, right? Because her mom worked for
Yeah,
Allen Park. Yeah.
that's what I'm
Boom.
saying, dude.
It's just I put
God
that
is good,
connection
man.
in.
It's
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah, it's wild how that all worked out, man.
for sure. So talk to us about working over at AP.
Dude, I loved it. Like, great group of guys. Some of the couple of the best bosses I ever worked underneath. They just wanted you to do your job. They're like, go out there. You want to get after it, bring people to jail. We're not super concerned about, like, we want you to write tickets. We want you to enforce traffic. We want you to do your job. But first things first, take care of your calls. First things first, be the police. Like, you're here to handle emergency calls. Be the police. Do that. And then whatever you do proactively after that is awesome. So they gave you the reins to do the job. So I was able to make some pretty good arrests there, and I didn't feel too much like pressure for the numbers. It made me want to give them those couple of like enforcement tickets that I probably wouldn't normally write, like actually or go looking for, because they were so cool about it. They're like, just go out there and do what you're gonna do, man. Be safe. So I might have like, and then living in the city, I would just go kind of sit by the schools and just like, if I was going to write a ticket, I would write it to somebody who's doing like 40 miles an hour at 25. Cause like, don't do that. There's little kids around. So like, to me, that was like worthy of writing a ticket to. Like, slow down, bro. You're like, I wasn't the guy who's going to go sit on the freeway with a laser or something like that. I can't do that, man.
For sure. And talk to us just kind of lessons learned, because that was your last department, right? So kind of some lessons learned, and then what the transition or what the decision making matrix was for transitioning out.
Yeah, man. So I'm there for my last 3 years. Uh, I loved it there. I think I had been through so much in my law enforcement career that I had started thinking about what life was going to be like after law enforcement, but I didn't think it would come as quickly as it ended up coming when I made the decision to finally leave. Um, but we had a change in chiefs. The chief that hired me, freaking awesome dude, gave me my chance because that department I worked for prior, like, they did some pretty shady stuff. Phone calls were made like off the record trying to get him to not hire me. And so the dude was awesome. He's like, I trust my guys who interviewed him. And I'd spoken to this young man. I think that I've hired a fine young officer. And he gave me and the detective who did my background was like, he was the man. He took everything they said just with a grain of salt. He understood that department. He had been around them before, the reputation they had. And I had good references. The guys that were my references worked with me on the road, and one of them being one of my training officers, and he just gave me a beautiful review, and the detective was like, "Yeah, we're going to hire this guy. I'm going to give this guy a chance because I don't think that all the things that they're saying about him are true. He just polices in a way that they just don't agree with. It's a stylistic issue more than anything, but whatever. So they changed chiefs. Uh, Allen Park didn't have a tattoo policy at the time, so I had to take advantage of that. Um,
For
yeah, I always,
for those that are just audio only, Mario just showed us the tattoos on his hands. So
yeah,
t-
I'm
tell
covered
us
in
what's on
tattoos, man.
the hands.
All right, so on my right hand, I have "Born for the Storm," and then 2012 on my knuckles, which is the year I became a cop. And on my left hand, I have a compass, and then "Stay true," true across my knuckles, like stay true to your moral compass, all that good stuff. But I had like the sleeves or whatever when I got hired there. They didn't care about my tattoos, which was awesome. I was there for a little bit, and I got to know everybody, and there was no policy. So I was like, well, I'm getting my hands tattooed, man. I'm not going to tattoo my face or whatever, but I've always wanted my hands done. So I get my hands done, and like nobody really cared. Like everybody was like, oh man, he got his hands done. They were kind of like a little, just like anything else. We're like, oh my god, your hands are tattooed, and then that was it. Like it didn't change anything. My supervisors were like, oh, that's actually some pretty good looking work, man. Yeah. And then the new guy becomes chief, and at the time he's a lieutenant, testing to become the next chief, and he made it his personal vendetta to try and hem me up for having hand tattoos. And so it turned into this whole ordeal, it just, we didn't see eye to eye for that. And I was like, well, you don't have a policy. And he's like, well, when I become chief, I'm going to institute a policy. And I was like, you go ahead. It's called past practice. You're not going to be able to do anything to me. He didn't like that. And then it turned into him calling me some names. And then he said he didn't call me some names. And I was like, okay, man, no problem. You're the guy in charge. I just want to be left alone. I just want to do my job. So I just told the union, I said, tell him not to make it personal, man. If he doesn't make it personal, he can say whatever he wants. But if he comes after me, I went through this once before. I'm not gonna go through it again. You know what I mean? Like I do my job, I do it well. So it doesn't change the way I do my job. But yeah, and rightfully so, dude. I mean, I know I pushed the envelope by doing it, but I absolutely know that, But it is what it is.
For sure. So then, what was it that got you out of policing?
Oh man, well, like we talked about earlier before we started recording, like COVID, man. COVID came through. I left law enforcement for a multitude of reasons. Something that we could probably talk about for an hour just on that subject alone. I felt, I felt right on, man. So I felt like it was my time to go. But before I got to that point, we had dealt with all of the bullshit that 2020 had to offer. And obviously we're here in Michigan. We had to deal with those lockdowns, and then being the police during that time, they expected us to enforce certain things that I I did not agree with. Governor writes an order. That doesn't mean people just lose their rights. So I didn't that didn't fly with me, and that was a hill I was willing to die on. I had no problem with that. Um, and I told people, I was very outspoken about it too. Because I was pretty comfortable there, so it was one of those things, and I got along with my supervisors, and for the most part, they completely agree with my stance. But I just happen to be pretty outspoken about it, and we're having these issues, and then you have a new chief who is like, well, we have to do this or we have to do that, and I said, I'll hand you my badge before I do that. And I'm not doing any of that. These people, there are people are calling the police, wanting us to go separate people in a park because they're hanging out in the park because of this, virus going around. You know what I mean? So I'm like, no, not doing that, man. People don't have to stay in their fucking homes if they don't want to. Just like you don't have to wear a mask if you don't want to, and you don't gotta have to get that shot if you don't want to. I wasn't gonna be an arm of the government that was gonna just turn a blind eye to that and just say, yes, sir, whatever you want me to do, whatever old Hitler up north wants me to do, I'll do it. That wasn't gonna happen, man. Like people have rights, period. Like, they just don't go away because, you know, the, our local government decides they're going to. It doesn't work that way. And I wasn't going to be the guy to enforce that.
And how was this pretty outspoken stance received?
I mean, I think just like anything else, right? You have guys that are like rah rah. Absolutely, I agree with you. And then when it comes time to put the rubber to the pavement, you'll see really quickly that guys aren't. They're just going to do what they need to do to keep, and not that anybody was violating people's rights or like throwing people in jail because of the COVID lockdown bullshit, and not in my department I was working for at all. But yeah, no, it's just like when you go to the union meetings and everybody's all like, "Yeah, man, we're gonna do this," and then when it's time to be like, "All right, let's do this," they're like, "Oh, well, I don't want to get my overtime taken away, or I don't want to get this or that." Then you find yourself being an army of one or two instead of 20 or 30 like you were before.
For sure. And so, did they get rid of you, or did you hand them the badge when they tried to force
Oh
the
no,
issue?
no, I ended up leaving just on my own accord. It was a surprise to everybody when I put in my time. That all kind of quieted down. I didn't leave until 2021. Uh, July 5th of 2021 was my last day. Um, but no, you kind of just worked our way through it, and then I was pretty much just left alone about that stuff. Like I made it very clear where I stood on it, and no supervisor asked me to do anything because they didn't agree with it either. So it all started to kind of like mellow itself out, and people started to speak up after so long of being locked up in their houses and all that. Like nationwide, people were kind of like, "This is kind of bullshit." So we didn't really have to argue about it too much anymore. But I saw where everything had gone. So I'll go back to 2012 when I started. I got to spend my first 2 years in a law enforcement capacity prior to Ferguson, prior to what happened with Mike Brown, prior to Black Lives Matter coming in. So when Ferguson happened, it changed law enforcement forever. So I watched it change right before my eyes as a young cop, and this happened right as I came back to Michigan, and then all of a sudden the real war on police really starts, and now killing cops is being celebrated all over the place. And not only is it being celebrated by people who want to do us harm, but it's celebrated by our government. It's celebrated, blah blah blah. Right? We've all heard the story. So I worked through all that, and that's how you kind of get to that us versus them mentality, because you're kind of always on point. You're living in this state of like almost hyper vigilance. Even when you're off duty walking around Kroger or something like that, you're watching everything, and that can be exhausting. And then you combine that with alcohol abuse, which I did for quite a while. It turned into a lot. I was living a life that I wasn't necessarily proud of outside of the job. You know what I mean? The way I was handling my stress, and the way I was binge drinking alcohol. If I'd be sober only when I was at work, man. If I worked Monday and Tuesday, I was sober for 2 days, and then if I was off Wednesday and Thursday, it was a party Wednesday and Thursday. Then I'd be sober for the next 3 days, and then if I was working, sober. If I wasn't working, I was drinking. And it turned into where alcohol became like a crutch in my life to just feel normal. And I guess when I became self aware of that, I started working. I started working on that. You know what I mean? I think that's a big thing. I had to be honest with myself. Like, yo, man, I'm not just having a good time. I'm uh I'm really trying. Every time I drink this shit, I'm trying to go numb. And I'm drinking this shit to put me to sleep at night. And so I had to work through that, and I did, and I'm grateful for it, because it's that's a slippery slope, dude. And a lot of guys go down it and they never ever find their way back up from it. And so that played a role, man. And then, like, I'm sorry I get all over the place, guys, but
Well, let's touch on that mental health aspect, because we have had an episode specifically about first responder mental health. So let's talk about that. At what point in your career did you start, at least maybe after the fact, did you notice that there was, you were sliding down a slope, like you were just saying, with the mental health stuff? And at what point did you start coping with alcohol?
I think that even very early on in my career, I coped with alcohol. I just didn't know it yet. I think it's definitely a cultural thing in law enforcement. You're being brought into this brotherhood, and like you're gonna drink together. You know what I mean? And then if you don't, you're looked at funny. Like, what the fuck's this guy's problem? Why isn't he out here getting shit faced with us? Why does that guy want to go home to his wife? What's his problem? Yeah, like all that. And it's hilarious. It's sad. It's not funny, but like you laugh about it. It's the truth. But it's definitely a cultural thing. I started coping with it pretty much I think immediately it took me years to kind of figure out that's what I was doing because it was just the norm. Like if we had a rough shift and you saw some nasty shit, and it was just kind of like, all right, boys, where are we going tonight? Because everybody was feeling the same way, you know. So it's like let's go pound these beers until we don't feel that way anymore, and then we're gonna get up tomorrow and we're gonna do it all over again because that's the fucking job and that's what we do. And that was kind of the way I lived my life throughout my entire 20s in my career. Like I live for this shit. I'm gonna I'm gonna work hard and party even harder. And whatever happens, happens. I'm just So as I got a little older, I would say 2020, like you get into the lockdowns and stuff like that. So I didn't mention this earlier. And part of 2020, I got into a fight with a suspect, and I had a busted my hand up. So I had to get my hand mobilized. It's in a cast for like 8 weeks. So when I was at that department, when I was at Allen Park, the department, we didn't have light duty. So you were just at home. So there wasn't like a desk position for you to work or something like that. So I was just at home, dude. So you're at home during the COVID lockdowns. You can't go anywhere. Nothing's open. It's you just there you are, right? Like this is early in the year. Like I think I got injured in March. Yeah, I was injured on. I remember St. Patty's Day that year, and I was injured. I had my hand was in a cast for St. Patty's Day. So for those 8, 10 weeks or however long I was out, you're just everything was shut down. So beer and I got really acquainted, like every single day. And then my hands in a cast, so I'm not training. The gyms are closed, so like you're just not doing anything besides the cardio I would do is I take the dog for a run and then come home and drink a dozen beers. So like you can imagine, like not exactly treating your body the best, right? And then I went through some bad stuff in my personal life, and I started really, really like leaning on alcohol at that point. And then I had to move back in with my parents. I went through like a breakup, and I lost the house, the dog, bad country song shit, right? So all that stuff, stacked up on top of me or whatever. And then I'm on the job. I got my brothers. But at that point in my life, dude, like we'll touch on mental health. Like that was the lowest point of my entire life. I felt as if I was an absolute failure. I felt that what did I do? Like how did I get here? I was 30 years old. Uh, I had enough money, dude, literally to go get myself like a rental house or an apartment. I didn't have enough money for a down payment on a new house for myself. I was like, how did I put myself in this position? And had the pity party for myself for a couple of months while drinking really heavily. And I actually had this conversation with a really close friend of mine the other day who was there like with me. I actually lived with him for a couple of weeks when this all first started happening. And then I ended up moving back with my parents. My dad was like, "Hey man, you can't keep couch surfing, and working and staying on people's couches. Just come back here." I was, "Well, I'm gonna get an apartment, and he's like, "No, don't waste your money on an apartment. Come back here." My dad, my mom, they let me crash rent free for a few months so I could stack my money up and buy it. And I bought my house now a few months later. But I was talking about it with my buddy, and I told him the truth about what I was dealing with in that time, which I never told anybody in that time. And he looked at me, man, and he was like, this dude's a savage. Like he's a been there, done that kind of cop. He's a badass dude. He's a guy I have tremendous respect for him." And he's getting tears in his eyes. And I was like, "What's wrong, man?" Because this is like years later now. I'm telling him this at my son's gender reveal party. So it's like years later, and he's like starting to well up, and he's like, "I had no idea." And he's like, "I'm sorry." I'm like, "What are you saying sorry for, bro? You weren't meant to know." I hit it, man. I was like, you could have gave me an Oscar for the performance I put on for everybody back then. He's like, "Man, I just thought you were just partying. Like it was part of the job. Like nobody thinks anything of it. You're just going out to the bar. You're single. You're doing whatever." And but no, when I put on the happiest face for the people around me was when I was really at my lowest. And then I dug into that pretty bad for a while. And I remember thinking to myself in my lowest moment, I never contemplated suicide directly, but I did say to myself one time, like, if somebody gets the better of me, like if somehow, some way a motherfucker gets the drop on me on the job, at least I won't hurt anymore. And that was the lowest of the low for me, and if I could say anything to anybody out there who might be feeling that way, it's like I said earlier, man, don't give up because it will get better, and it will get a million times better. But you got to put in the work on yourself. You got to be willing to look yourself in the mirror, and you got to have the hard conversation with yourself. Sometimes people need to hear it from somebody else, and sometimes you just got to, like I said earlier too, you got to cowboy the fuck up and figure it out yourself. And that's what I had to do. My dad had told me, and I'm forever grateful to him for it. He came in my room one night and he looks at me, and I'm sitting there, man. And I'm like, I'm not drunk. I had a couple beers or whatever, and I'm just like, I went to bed at like 7 o'clock at night. I was just depressed. He comes in my room. Mind you, I'm living there in his house, you know. And he comes in the room and he sits down. And he's like, "What's up, man?" I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he's like, "What's wrong? You know, like what's the matter? Like it's been X amount of months. You know, what's going on with you? You know what I mean?" And he's being pretty stern about it. And I'm like, you know, I just feel sad all the time. That was the only thing I could muster up. You know, like it was difficult for me as a man too to like tell my father that. You know, and like it's one thing to talk about your emotions and shit like that. It's not easy for most guys. But like, all I could muster up without actually crying in that moment was I just feel sad all the time. And he looked at me and he's like, I understand that. He's like, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to quit? And I was like, you know, and in my mind, I'm like, great pep talk, Dad, you know. But it was exactly what I wanted to hear, what I needed to hear. I mean, exactly what I needed to hear. And I was like, no, I'm not going to quit. He's like, okay, I love you. I'm here for you. But this is something you've got to figure out. And he slapped me on my shoulder and he walked out of the room. And the next morning, I changed everything forever. It was exactly what I needed to hear. And I woke up the next morning and I said, it is time for you to grab your fucking nuts, dude, and get to work, because this is what you're doing right now is miserable and it's unacceptable. And, you know, so I started diving deep into my faith, man. And I took a break from alcohol. I needed enough time away from it to just rearrange my relationship with it. I told myself I'll never use alcohol as a crutch again. Socially, I'll have drinks, you know, and things like that. Go out, have a beer with the boys, stuff like that. But I'll never use alcohol to numb my emotions again, or to like because I had a bad day or because I don't want to feel. I'll never use it for that again. And I'm proud to say I haven't since that day. And but it can be a lot on you, man. That job will wear on you. I don't care how tough you are. I don't care how mentally strong you are. That job will wear on you. And then you have the exterior of your personal life, your relationships of your personal life, the bad decisions you make because of the people you choose to put yourself around when you're on the job. You know, misery loves company. And, you know, there's never a shortage of people willing to drink with you. But, you know, crack open your Bible and say you're going to go sober for a little bit, and people are like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? You know, so it's you figure that out pretty quick, and that's good too, because there's some things you got to do on your own. And
for sure.
yeah, but yeah, no, it got low and then it got better, man. You know what I mean? Like, not to, you know,
What were
you have
the
to pay attention.
what were the day-to-day steps that you took to kind of right the ship?
I'd say get like training. Training's always been big, man. Go to the gym. Um, I started reading my Bible. I started praying. Big thing for me was faith. Um, and just like you hear people talk about self talk. Self talk's a big thing, man. Like you wake up and you got to tell yourself like, yo, I'm going to do this today. And today, like hour by hour, day by day, you just fight back that noise. Fight back that, you know, I'm a failure. All the bullshit that gets like your head is just going crazy with. You fight all that shit back. And you just keep telling yourself whatever you need to tell yourself, whatever hypes you up or whatever keeps you focused, whatever words those are for you individually. That's what I would say for me. It was just like, you're a bad motherfucker, dude. Don't ever let anything beat you like that again. You're down, but you're not out. Let's go. Like, let's go. And I just did that every day until it just kind of became habitual. And then, I mean, you just learn to you see life through a different lens, you know, and gratitude, really being grateful for having another day, another breath. Then you realize that it ain't that bad, you know. It can pretty much always be worse if you're still breathing. You know what I mean? So it's just being grateful and seizing the day, dude. As you know, corny as that may sound, it's the truth, because life is so precious, man, and we don't know when it's going to be up for us like that, you know. So take advantage of every day and And if you're struggling that bad, man, just then seek things to be grateful for, is what I would say. Seek things that are positive in your life. And if you can't find anything, then there's got to be somebody around you that can point you in the right direction and tell somebody. Because most of the time, people have no idea you're fighting that alone. Most of the time, people have no clue at all. Or if they have a slight inkling of it, they don't know how to approach you about it. They don't really know how to be like, hey, man, are you good? Because when you send that text, like, you good? And then that text alone right there could save somebody's life, because they might be like, oh, here's my chance. Here's my chance. Like, I get to tell somebody that this is what I'm dealing with, you know?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And then at what point did Lindsay come into your life? Was that right around the same time?
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked that. So we're sitting, I'm back to my parents' house, right? And getting into my, like, really, I've always been a Christian, but I kind of, like, you know how it is, you stray away, and, like, there's no such thing as a perfect human by any means. And I was very far from that. But I'm sitting in my parents' living room. I got the place to myself one day, and I'm praying, man. And I pray, and I said, God, if I'm meant to be alone for the rest of my life, then please give me the strength to just be alone. Show me where I'm supposed to go with my career, my business, and give me the strength to be alone and just be a very good uncle, a very good brother, a very good son. If I'm meant to have a wife, if I'm meant to be a husband, if I'm meant to be a father, then please, please send me a wife. And I ended the prayer with that. And then I met Lynn's 2 months later. And throughout that entire time, her mom had been talking. So her mom worked in records at my police department. And she's just a wonderful lady. I used to bring her coffee when I was on day shift, and we would just shoot the shit. And one day she asked me if I was seeing anybody, and and this is a long time prior. I was like, yes, and she was like, oh, okay. I just think you and my daughter would have a wonderful time together. And I remember always thinking, like, how nice is that for a woman to, say to a man, like, I think, like, you and my daughter would get along. You and my daughter would have a great time together. That's very nice. She must see something in me. And at the time I was a major fuck up. So I was like, man, oh man, I got this lady fooled, But I tell you what, man, like, God is crazy. I walked into her office one day, and I was like, so, how about you take down my number and give it to your daughter? And that's how I started the conversation. And just so happened that the night, my wife at the time was a traveling nurse, and she was home on a home contract before she was trying to go to Hawaii. So when I said this to her mom the night before at dinner, she had told Lindsay that she wanted her to meet me, and Lindsay was like, "Mom, if this guy is this wonderful dude you keep telling me about or whatever, that's great and all, but I'm telling you right now, he's not going to have the balls to ask you for my number. And if he did have the balls to ask you, he's not going to have the balls to call me." So she repeats that to me verbatim. So you guys will meet my wife one day. You'll see she's the sweetest woman in the world. It doesn't even make sense that she actually said those words, because that's not how she talks, right? So, and I think her mom knew that would, like, flick the switch in me. So I looked right at her mom and I was like, give me your fucking number. And I called her right there, and she didn't answer. I left her a voicemail, and she called me back that night, and we went out like a week later and been together ever since.
Very
But yeah,
nice.
man, that's awesome.
That's a funny story. Uh, and then you kind of briefly mentioned that you had a business at that point. So what was your business?
Oh, I was looking, like, I was at the beginning stages of figuring out what I was going to do. So, like, real estate, I knew I wanted my own apparel brand. So I was kind of just like, I was still in law enforcement, obviously, at the time, but I was kind of working my way out, and but I was still looking further down the road. I didn't have full self confidence in myself yet to just dive into entrepreneurship. So I was praying about that, whatever, and I meet Lynn's, at the beginning of 2021, January 2021. We're together. She moves in with me. I buy the house. She moves in with me. Like 2 months later, I leave law enforcement in July, and I start working my decision to leave. I got a job with the local 687, and I was going to go be a carpenter. So I got into trade school, the whole nine. I still wasn't fully prepared. Like, in my mind, I didn't have enough confidence to dive into entrepreneurship. So my original plan, I took a safe route. I was like, I'm going to go do this. I was in, like, vocational wood shop and all that through high school. I loved working with my hands. I was like, I could do this. I like this kind of stuff. I'll go get my journeymans over the course of the next 4 years, and I'm going to start my own home remodeling company. I'll enjoy this. I'm not going to be dealing with the public as much. I'll be dealing with customers, blah blah blah. All the justifications in my head to why I should do this route. And it was a safe bet. I was leaving law enforcement for a steady check, and all that good stuff. So I go do it. I make the decision to leave, um, and I do that for I think it was about 6 months. Forever grateful to those guys I worked with, man. I went there, and I'm transitioning into the civilian world again, for the first time in 10 years, and it was crazy. It was just so different, right? I just handed in my badge and my gun, and now I'm hanging drywall. You know what I mean? And the dudes I worked with, man, I was doing commercial construction, and just a great group of guys, man. Hardworking fucking dudes. And I get there, and it was kind of like being on the job again. They're just busting each other's balls and just working and so then they're like, "What did you do before?" Or whatever. I was a cop, man. They're like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, I was leaving law enforcement. I've always wanted to do this type of work, blah 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 blah." And they're like, "All right, right on." And I mean, I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the guys, but it was, as my wife would say, I was unfulfilled. She's like, I could tell you were extremely unfulfilled, and she never said a word about it. She was like, just the way that you operated and the way that you were, I knew that it wasn't going to be enough for you, but you had to figure that out on your own, and I did. Um, but yeah, I'll forever be grateful for that time because that really showed me. Those guys helped me transition back in the civilian world. It was hard work. I have tremendous respect for what they do. I knew that I did not want to do that for my next 20 some years, being in my 30s already. And I was like, and I wasn't fulfilled. It's no knock on what they do. Like I said, man, great dudes, and they're crazy underpaid for how hard those guys work, man. Those guys work fucking hard, and I learned a ton from them. But like you said earlier, the COVID stuff was still happening, right? It's 2021, but there's still like the vaccine mandates. That is a big thing that everybody's had to deal with. Well, I wasn't. That's just not my style, man. You do whatever you want to do. I don't judge people, bro. Like if you felt the need to get it, by all means, you got it. I don't care. But I wasn't gonna have somebody tell me I needed it, and I wasn't gonna have somebody tell me I needed it to work for them. So it came down to like, oh, if you don't have it, you won't be able to work on these certain job sites, and this is what's going to be coming down the line, and they were cool about it, man. Like they were just like, this is how it's going to be, guys. This is kind of like the future of what we're dealing with. And the guys I worked with, the supervisors I had, I got along great with them. And so they were just straight up with me, and I told them, I was like, all right, man, I'm out, dude. Like I'm not going to do it, and like if I'm just going to get laid off and have to bounce from company to company to company within the union because of this, and it's going to go on for the foreseeable future, I'm going to take my chances on myself. You know what I mean? And I was doing some more private security work at that time, just on the side, like just cash work to make more money. And I had a good job coming up for the weekend that was going to pay me out enough to get me through for a bit, and I jumped on that, and I left around Thanksgiving time. And those dudes, they threw me like a little going away party at B Dubs in Ann Arbor on my last day. It was awesome. Fucking great guys, man. We all drank a bunch of beer and ate some wings, and they sent me off, and they were like, "Man, it was a pleasure working with you. Pleasure meeting you, dude." And a bunch of good dudes. I keep up in touch with a few of them still. But yeah, that's how I started, man. And I don't want to leave this out. As I'm driving in for shift that morning, as clear as day, man, clear as day, God says to me, "Leave now or you'll never leave." As clear as day. And so that's when I was like, all right, like that's cemented. It's time for me to go. And like, it's time to jump on these things that I feel that he's implanted in me to pursue. You know what I mean? So jumped on that. And I had already had my real estate, my course. I had started like 6, 8 months, 10 months prior. And I just set it to the side, just kind of like fiddle fucking around. I wasn't putting in the work like I should. So I was like 2 hours into it, right? So I picked it up, and when I left, my plan was like, I'm getting my real estate license. I'm diving into real estate full time, and then I'm gonna start building my businesses that way. So I get home, I take like the weekend, to kind of just hang out and let my wife and I's head wrap around everything and go over our plans. And And on that Monday, I just dove into the 40-hour online course. I knocked that out in like, I think it took me about 5 days. I just worked on it sundown each day in my living room, man, on my laptop, and hammered that out. And then I got the first available test, passed the test on the first try because everybody told me I was going to fail it. So I took that personally. And I was like, ain't no fucking way I'm failing this thing. And I passed it. And then I jumped in with Real Estate One, and great. The managing broker I have there is a wonderful dude. I'm actually transitioning out of there right now, coming over to 10-7 with Mike. So I'm really looking forward to that. I got one more deal to close this here in the next, hopefully within the next week, just after Christmas. I think is what we're going to be scheduled for. Get that one, so I don't got to worry about transferring all the paperwork and all that shit, and jump over to 10-7. And because I've been knowing Mike for a couple of years now, a wonderful dude, and it's long overdue that I made that jump. I've been working on my own, and it's definitely time for me to jump into. And plus, he's a great teacher. He's helped me a ton in my own private business, and it's so I'm excited for that. But that's how
For
I ended up there, man. And then, and obviously I started the apparel company about 6-7 months ago. I went live with that. Now, has it been that long? Summertime. Yeah, about 4 months, probably 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, so talk to us about the Alpha Standard apparel company.
Yeah, man. The Alpha Standard Apparel Company. I've been working on that for, gosh, it was over a year before I took it live. Um, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. If I attach my name to something, if I'm doing something and it has to be to a certain standard. I can't, like, with anything I do, I just can't half-ass stuff. I don't think it's a flaw, but like sometimes I can get like overwhelmed or overwhelming to people because I'm like, it's got to be this. If I'm going to put this out there, it's got to be dope, right? So I spent like 6-7 months, man, just testing like with manufacturers and shirts and fits and hoodies and fits and mixtures and like blends and all this stuff, and how I was going to print them and how I was going to do it and all this stuff that goes into it, right? Because like it's not hard to start like a t-shirt company. I would say it's extremely difficult to build a strong apparel brand, as I'm trying to do right now. It's definitely, anybody can sell some t-shirts, right? Like you put some dope shit on a shirt, people are going to buy it. But sustainability and building up like a tribe, that's like what I'm aiming for with my brand. And that's like, that would say it's extremely difficult, but also very rewarding. When I see people post on their Instagram or something like that and they'll tag us in it, I'm like, that's the coolest shit ever, man. I don't even know that guy. And he's in California or Texas or New York or wherever, and he's rocking one of my hoodies or rocking one of my shirts. I'm like, that's awesome. And I do everything myself. I'm a one-man show. I don't have any employees at this time. So I do my social media. I do it all, man. Everything gets packed and all that is all me. And I put a little handwritten note with every order because I appreciate everybody who people work hard for their money, man. And I think I put out a pretty great product that I've tested over the course of that time before I ever took it live to the public. And people that have purchased it over the last few months have given me tremendously good feedback. So that's awesome, man. I look forward to the future with that, with both of my businesses. I love real estate as well. Like I can't say that I get super stoked about selling a house, like the house itself. I get stoked about helping the person achieve like that goal. Like watching somebody, like if you get a first time home buyer, man, you see them move into their first house and you help them get there. Like, that's awesome, man. Watching somebody be like, this is mine, that's super cool. Helping people, man. I guess is probably really the reason I got into it. Don't get me wrong. There's great money to be made in it as well. Like you got to make money to live. We want to be successful financially as well, right? In order to live the lifestyle we want to live. But being able to help people, man, I think is probably the coolest part about the real estate thing. And you learn a ton, dude, in those deals and negotiations and just like translating, being a cop, knowing how to talk to people, being able to talk to people and negotiations. And it goes a long way, building relationships and being the person that somebody wants to work with, and, not just being another face in the crowd, putting on a fancy suit and renting a Range Rover for the day, you know, which is
For
cool. Don't get
sure.
me wrong, man. Like, depending on your environment, you might need that to get your name out there, right? Like, you might, depending on where you're working, where you're selling real estate, people might not work with you if you're not pulling up in a Mercedes. You know what I mean? So you might have to make that sacrifice for a little bit. Fake it till you make it. But
Well, Mike
try.
drives Mike drives a Hummer, so and
Yeah, dude, eight to
he's
the
a
gallon,
broker,
baby.
so yeah.
2006 Hummer.
Dude, that's awesome. Just that's a zombie ride, bro.
Yeah, it's pretty.
You ain't got to worry about the apocalypse with that thing,
It's,
dude.
That's it, till you run out of
uh,
gas.
yeah,
Yeah, be a bitch to push.
yeah. A lot of people notice you. Like it's not a low key vehicle. That's one downside is you can't
Right,
really go anywhere without like somebody not yelling or just seeing you and just saying, "Oh, I saw you at such and such."
right.
So I
Yeah,
can't.
you can't be incognito, dude.
No, and I came from like F-150s, which is like they're
Right,
everywhere. So like that's a little bit. That's not
blend
my.
right in, dude.
Yeah, I'm not really like allowed in it. If you see it too, it's not just the Hummer. It's like it has like these. I don't even know what 20, 22 something even big. So I'm not really like that. That's not even my style. I just bought it as is, but it has these oversized
Right,
tires, oversized rims, so it's even louder. It's
that's
so
awesome.
it's for now.
And it's one of those Hummers that has like the 2 foot truck bed on it, so it's
Yeah,
like
the soot.
very
Oh,
distinct.
that's sick.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. It's fun
I
though.
love it.
They're actually the drive on it's fantastic, man. It's a great truck. It's just not
Hell
great
yeah.
on gas and not too much room.
Right.
As big as it is, it's not very roomy. Like for in the
Tight
back,
quarters still.
yeah, in the back and stuff, and just for storing stuff or hauling stuff around like that. It's not the most practical vehicle.
You
So
look cool while
Mario,
doing it, man. That's all that
Right,
matters.
right.
so Mario, you've just wrapped up your second year in real estate. Talk to us, well, full time real estate. Talk to us kind of about the lessons you've learned about the business and then about yourself during that time.
Oh
Because
man.
that's 2
Uh
years of full time entrepreneurship too.
yeah, man. Yeah, it's whew. We go back to like what I said earlier, you just can't quit. Because it like there's not really a day that like you have your major ups and then the crashing downs, right? I would say some lessons learned as far as real estate goes. Um, don't count your money until it's closed because you don't always make it to the closing table. So don't spend that money before it comes in, especially if your things are getting slow for you. Just starting out, things can get a little slow. Transitioning from law enforcement to being a realtor was difficult because of my sphere. So everybody saw me as a cop still for a very long time. So I didn't get my first deal for about 6 months, and it was from a buddy who was a fireman, a friend of a friend or whatever. But that was my first listing. Everybody else was kind of just like, "Oh man, my buddy was selling his house, but I forgot you're a realtor now, man." And I'm like, "Bro, so you got to change people's minds, right? So like you do something for so long, especially profession like law enforcement, people just associate like, oh, it's Mario, he's a cop. So that took a little bit. Like, that was a lesson learned. Definitely don't spend the money before you have it. If it's not under contract, then a handshake doesn't mean anything. People will back out on you, or people will change up on you very quickly. Um, it's business. Try not to take it personally. There will be personal things that happen. You will have things like that. Bridges will be burned sooner or later. Um, just don't do it like on your own. Like, hopefully if that bridge is burned, it's because it was somebody else's issue and you did what you could. But a client will become a friend faster than a friend will become a client. You got to accept that, and it's not personal. It's just, and I didn't say that, so I can't take credit. I heard that from somebody. I don't remember who, but it's a great line and it's true. It's not personal, man. Like some people just don't want you to know their finances. Some people that are family friends don't want like, say if somebody's friends with my dad and I've known him for years now, he's got X amount of money in the bank and he wants to buy an up north house, but he doesn't really want people to know how much money he's got. But I'm helping him with his mortgage and, I got to have access to all that stuff. I get it. And people would rather deal with a stranger who doesn't have any connection to their sphere than they would with somebody who's like they've known for a long time. It's a weird thing, but that's something I've learned. You would just think automatically, that's my boy, dude. He's going to use me. And I've had people that were like legitimately my friends who went with other people, and they were like, "Oh, it's nothing personal, man. I didn't want to bother you." Was always a big one. I'm like, "You're not bothering me, but that's what I do for a living. Like, you're bothering me because I just missed out on that deal." But those are definitely some of the lessons learned. Uh, Delayed gratification. uh, you got to live it because it's true, and you got to learn to live within your means. And things are going to be tight. You might start off strong. You might get a couple really good things going for you. You're at the mercy of a market, that's for sure, but you're also at the mercy of how hard you're willing to work. Are you willing to keep up on those relationships? Are you willing to stay relevant to people? Are you willing to look kind of stupid on social media making, I'm not saying be corny and make some of those ridiculous posts we see realtors make, but like, are you willing to put yourself out there? Nobody cares about your market updates. I'm sorry, I'm not knocking them, but nobody really cares. And like, unless somebody is a very analytically minded person, they don't really care to see what like the houses that sold in Taylor last week. You know what I mean? Like, unless they live there and that's going to be their comps that you're going to run for them anyway. Maybe, but I think just it's really about relationships and just how if you just help people, they're going to give it back to you. Um, but put yourself out there. People need to know that you do it. You know what I mean? Like without overdoing it. I'm not a big fan of asking for business. Like if you know anybody who wants to buy or sell, please let me know. But I think that there is a time and place for that. It does. I think that you should do it. Like you can do it without seeming like being corny, or like sometimes all it takes is you just being like, hey man, if you know anybody, then you might have a friend like, oh, as a matter of fact, I work with a guy who said he might need to sell his house, and then there you go, you're in. It's not there's nothing wrong with asking. I think I had to learn that myself is what I'm getting at.
Mhm.
Without looking like wanting to look needy, I guess you could say. It's a slow burn. That's something I think we all dive in expecting, boom, things to take off, take off, take off. And I truly believe if you grind it out and you put in good work, you're just not staying busy. You're doing the right work. It will take off for you, but you have to be willing to delay that gratification and stick to it, man. Like day in and day out. There's be days you don't want to do it. You just got to do it. Just like anything else. Days you don't want to work out. Days you don't, you know, whatever. You just got to do it over and over and over again.
How do you
Consistency,
think
I guess.
your 10 years in law enforcement helped you with this entrepreneurship, and then with the apparel brand, and then specifically with real estate?
I definitely think being able to talk to people, being able to build relationships with people instantly, because you have to build rapport instantly in law enforcement, right? Like if I walk up on a call, I have to be able to take this guy who's at a 10 and bring him back down to a 5. And I got to be able to do it quickly, efficiently, without having to escalate that situation to violence, hopefully. So I got to figure out what makes him tick inside of 5, 10 seconds, right? So when I walk into a room and I'm dealing with somebody for a business transaction, there's no guns being drawn. So I'm able to navigate around that pretty freaking quickly. And I think that for being a cop has really helped me with that. So when it comes to negotiations, when it comes to getting to know people, um, that helps for sure. And also being comfortable in your own skin, man. I think that having a level of confidence from doing the job for so long, and just my own personal inner confidence, that helps when you're dealing with people. You're not afraid to walk away, right? Like I don't deal. I know that I can say no to people, and it is what it is. It's just business. I'm not. It's not personal. That person may not be the right fit for me as a client. I might not be the right fit for them personality wise. We might not be able to get this done together. Maybe I know somebody who'd be a better fit for you, right? So like having that confidence from being a cop, I think that plays a role for real estate as well. Um, the apparel brand, I mean, for me personally, I design everything myself, so I make stuff that I like to wear, and I think about things that people that are like-minded to me would think are pretty dope and they'd want to wear. So that's how most I come up with most of my stuff. So being a cop, I have an inner look at like law enforcement, military, how the mind works. So I think about stuff that like you see people wearing, and like we all train jujitsu. So like, oh, what are the bros wearing at the gym? Like I like that. I would buy that if I saw that. If another company made that, I would buy it. Right. So like that plays a role in my mind. And I kind of have. I think I found out what I've learned in that too is I'm more artistic than I thought I was. When I saw I make all my own designs on my computer and all that, so I didn't know I was good at that, but I guess they're selling, so I'm pretty decent at it, I guess.
That's actually what I was about to ask next. Is have you always been artistic? And I guess the answer there is no.
I think I've always been pretty good with words. I think that like I know it's not really I've been artistic-y whatever, but I've never really tried to draw or anything like that. But doing it on a computer kind of comes easily to me. So I didn't know that and that just comes based off of me not having the funds to hire somebody to do it. You just got to get creative, right? If I had the funds, I wouldn't do any of this stuff. I would be focused on building other things and kind of let it automate. But in a way, I'm very grateful that I didn't have the extra cash to just hire this out. I had to do it all myself, and it's really showed me the ins and outs of the business. And now I have more of an attachment to it, I would say, too, emotionally, right? Like it feels a little more personal, which is cool.
For sure. So remind people what your brand is and then kind of what you've got going in 2024 with the brand.
Oh, for sure, man. Yeah, it's called the Alpha Standard Apparel Company. Website is www.thealphastandardapparel.com. We're on Instagram at the Alpha Standard Apparel, Facebook. We're on TikTok, but I don't do much with TikTok just because, yeah, I mean, I could get all political, but I don't really care for that platform. But yeah, bunch of new designs coming out January. I did a like a Christmas winter release, and I love to do giveaways, man. I did a Halloween giveaway and a Christmas giveaway, and I try to do one for every holiday, and like my goal is to be able to do one almost every month in 2024 because I think it's really cool, man. Like people, you're building. It's much more than just selling clothes. Like you're building a brand. You're building a tribe of people that really resonate with what you put on the clothing. So I think you give these people who are like they're spending their money with you, and then you go on your social media. They follow your social media. They engage with you on social media. Then you give them a chance to just tag a friend, and they win a hoodie. And I charge $55 for a hoodie. So it's like you win a hoodie, and maybe, dude, the economy's tough, right? Not everybody wants to drop $55 on a hoodie right now, but they're like, oh, I really wanted that one. You get to give people a chance to win it just for tagging a buddy in the comments or something like that. It's kind of like my way of giving back as like an appreciation. So my goal is to try and do a giveaway, whether it be a t-shirt, hoodie, sweatshirt, whatever, in like every month of 2024. Just something cool to like just to kind of give back as an appreciation for all the people that are helping me build this brand. And then some new designs. I got some really cool stuff. Some some somewhat political stuff. You know what I mean? Because like that's the era we live in, right? Like, and I believe in you stand up for what you believe in. You know what I mean? I don't have to agree with you to understand your viewpoint and respect it, right? Like, I think that America's gotten far away from that. Like, I'm sure there'll be people listening to this or whatever and like hear my foul mouth, but also hear me talk about God and be like, that guy's a fucking hypocrite. I'm like, yeah, whatever, man. You can think whatever you want. I don't care, but like I think everybody is entitled to feel however they want to feel. You know what I mean? It is what it is. Like I don't have to agree with it, bro. Like it doesn't matter. Like we could still be boys too. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like unless you voted for Biden, dude, then I don't know. I'm just kidding.
for
but
sure. So tell us. Obviously, the brand name is pretty obvious as to what your brand is about, but tell us kind of what the idea was behind it and the meaning to you.
okay, right on, man. Yeah, dude. So the idea kind of came to me as I was thinking about um like what I wanted to put out there to the world and like how I wanted to do it right. And like I knew I needed a strong name. And so of course I prayed about it, right? And then it came to me one day. Just those three words came to me. And then I was thinking about what those three words meant, the Alpha Standard, what it meant to me personally, but how I wanted to leave it kind of as like just I wasn't going to elaborate on what it meant to me personally. I wanted everybody who came across it to create their own idea of what the Alpha Standard meant in their life, right? So I've never put out like exactly how I came up with the name or exactly what it means. I've always left it to where, and when people ask me, I always hit them with like, "What do you think it means?" And I get a multitude of different answers, like, "Oh, like you train hard." And you train in jujitsu and like you live life at this super high standard and you're doing this, you're doing that, you're getting after it every single day. And like all of those are like true things, right? That's all the truth. The real meaning behind it is Jesus, bro. Like Jesus set the alpha standard, like the ultimate man to ever walk the earth, right? So like we'll never be able to live to that standard. So I chase that standard. That's where I came up with the name. But I love leaving it open to interpretation so people can make what they feel about it. You know what I mean? So really, the alpha standard is just chasing the highest level of perfection for your life, day in day out. We'll never reach perfection, so we just keep chasing it, right? So just getting up and getting after it, being a great husband, being a great wife, being a great mother, being a great father, staying physically fit, always searching and seeking for more, and like really setting the standard in your life so that way people look at you and you might inspire them is what I would tell people is what I would like them to get out of it. And then I try to have some of the designs kind of replicate that.
For sure. And you kind of already hit on this, but when people think alpha, I mean, they tend to think alpha male, right? But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
there
And there's
you have
that too,
female,
right?
yeah, but you have female stuff too, right? Like it's
Uh huh.
not just
Sure
a
do.
male brand. You sell female stuff too.
Sure do, man. One of my favorite female designs is the Alpha Mama design, and my mother inspired that design. You know what I mean? And like my wife also did too, because you can be an alpha woman and not be a total pain in the ass, like that everybody thinks of nowadays when they think of like a Type A woman. Uh, like I'm a Type A male. You guys are Type A males. My wife has a Type A personality, but we don't not get along. You know what I'm saying? Like you can have a strong independent personality as a woman and still have a great relationship with your husband and still let him lead and still be a team, a unit. You know what I'm saying? And like I came up with the Alpha Mama design because like you see these women who are taking care of their babies and they're handling their business and they're not going by these societal norms where they're saying where we can go down a deep long road with that, right? But like they're like, no, I'm a mom and I'm proud of it. I'm a wife and I'm proud of it. I'm like, that's alpha mama shit, man. So that's how I came up with that design. But yeah, no, I do a lot of female designs too, and I've got my wife has designed some of the new sweatshirts we just came out for the ladies too, like Mom Life, and she's got one that says "In My Mom Era." Let's see, Mama needs a coffee because like they all like coffee, right? uh, I think there's another one, "Unapologetically Me." It's in like a pink and orange or whatever. So we try and do stuff that has some femininity to it too for our ladies out there as well.
For
I
sure.
might buy that
And,
Mama Needs a Coffee one. I would.
Yeah, dude, it's awesome.
That's
I'll send it to you, bro. Don't worry about it. You just tell me what size you need.
all right, and then also, if anybody follows you, they know that one of the things you're doing is run every day 2023. So, personally, that sounds awful. So, talk to us about the decision making process for that and kind of what you've learned about yourself throughout 2023. Because you're on day, what was today? 350 something?
352, I think today. 352, I think is what it was. I have to look, but I think it was 352.
Yeah, it's a lot of
Yeah,
days in a
man,
row.
it is, dude. It is. It's after like the first 30 days were the hardest because it's painful. I'm not. But I'll preface this by saying I'm not an avid runner, or at least I wasn't before before I came up with this challenge. Last year around this time, early December or whatever, I always go through these phases where I'm like, oh, I got to start doing a little more cardio. I'm always doing jujitsu, whatever. I'm like, I got to run more. You know what I mean? My body responds pretty well to it, and it's hard. I don't like it. To be completely honest with you, I hated running distance. I'd rather run sprints or just like try and PR a mile time, get it over with as quick as possible. Like I'd rather feel the burn in my lungs and be out of breath for a second and not have to continue doing it. That was the whole reason I would do that, right? Because to me, it was like harder in the moment, but easier like later. So I'm sitting back and I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, you know, I want to I want to do something. I got to run more. I hate fucking running. I can't stand it. So how about I run every fucking day in 2023? And that's pretty much how it went. Like inside my head, my own little self talk, man. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. So then I got up January 1st, hopped on the treadmill, and started with. I think the first run was it was less than a mile. That was the one thing I did was smart. The first couple of days I started slow because I was still lifting, I still doing jujitsu. So like, there's some days have multiple workouts. So I started off slow. I was like, because I always would get into it, like running, and I'd hurt myself somehow, some way. I'd start running again, and then I'd just take off on this 1 mile run as fast as I could. And then all of a sudden, I'm like hurting the next day. I don't want to run again for a month, you know? So I'm like, all right, I'm going to start off slow, whatever. The first couple of days, I'm like, all right, a mile here, mile there, mile here, mile there. I do about a mile and a half a day for like the first probably like 2 weeks, maybe. And then I have a Peloton treadmill, so I started doing some of the classes to switch things up or whatever, which is really cool. That's made like the times that I run inside pretty nice to be able to switch things up. But I was still being a bit of a pussy about it. I was doing like 20-minute hit run classes, so I could like walk in between. I'm running sprints and all that, but to me that was easier. Later on, I started getting into like, okay, like one of my goals for 2024 is I want to run a marathon. So I started getting into more distance work, like really just recently. But yeah, no, honestly, man, I thought about what I hated as far as physical fitness, and it was running. So I said, okay, if I'm going to be better overall at everything I do, you gotta do shit that you hate. So I'm going to run every single day for a year and see what happens.
yeah.
And I would say Go ahead, bro.
Well, I think one of the most impressive things with this challenge, like this type of thing right here, is the consistency of do whether it's running sprints, distance, a mile one day, 3 mile, like whatever that the
Right,
the every single day getting up and doing it. That's the hardest because I have a friend of mine does a similar challenge, but it's like with rucking.
right
It's
on.
every single day,
Oh, nice.
and I tried to like kind of join in on the challenge with him, but I wasn't. I was just like, yeah, I'll do that too, and I kind of didn't give it any more thought. I think I lasted like 6 days, and then
Yeah,
I
dude,
missed a day, and because it's like, especially you're lifting, you're training jujitsu, and it's like, okay, you're gonna have days where you feel run down. You might even be a little under the weather. You might have
for sure.
tweaked something in your body. You already lifted
Oh, dude, yeah,
twice, and then
groin,
yeah,
hamstrings, whatever.
still
Yeah,
got to do like that thing that you committed to yourself to do. So that's the
right,
biggest thing. It's like being consistent, but then like you told yourself I want to do this, so it's like honoring your commitment to it. It's super hard,
dude, for
man. that's
sure.
that's the biggest the way I kind of see the reward on it. It's like that part of it is not, like I said, not doesn't matter how far somebody goes compared to somebody else or what the
Yeah,
challenge is, but it's
right.
the consistency of doing it every day for a year is impressive. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Thank you, bro. I
Mhm.
appreciate that, man. It, yeah, because you're gonna get sick. Um, I like throughout this year, I still like every now and again you go out and you drink a little too much, and then you're like, oh, I'm hurting a bit today, man. How easy would it be to just be like, how about I don't and say I did? And don't get me wrong, did that thought come across my mind? Absolutely. And then I immediately shut it down because you're like, what is I, what conquer your inner bitch or whatever. I love that line too. I don't know who said it, but like, yeah, that's I've gotten up in the morning and being like sick and tired and had to work and this, that, and the other, and then been like, oh man, I want so bad to just not do this and then go fucking do it. And usually those are the days I'd run the furthest because I'm like, you really got to destroy that thought. Then my son was born in June, and he was born. So before we went to the hospital that morning at 7 a.m., I got up at like 4:30 and got my run in. I was like, I know I'm good for 24 hours now. So whenever he's born, this day is
That's it.
done.
It counts as
He was
the
born
day.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I got up early in the morning before we went, got it done. He ended up being born at like 9:30 that night. So the next morning, we're there, and my wife's parents were coming to meet him or whatever. And when they came in to meet him, they had this bullshit rule that only two people could be in the room at the same time. So like one of you needs to leave. And it was stupid, but I was, oh, this is perfect. So I went outside and I ran around the hospital for like 2.5 miles. And I was like, now I'm good for another day. And everybody was, I can't believe you didn't miss a day. And so I recorded that shit too, just so people were talking shit. I'm like, oh yeah, here it is. It's done, son. But yeah, and then like having him, like he didn't sleep for like no bullshit for the first 12 weeks of his life, dude. He was up like every half hour. So some of those mornings where you got to get on that treadmill, or I would like to go outside. It was summertime, so I run outside, and then I just go to the gym too. And my wife's looking at me like, I don't know how you're still doing this. And I'm like, I'll be completely honest with you, I don't want to do it at all. But I'm freaking however many days in, and I sure as shit ain't quitting now. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, just consistency, man. I think I learned one thing I learned too that I think I already knew, but it was a nice reminder over this is that if I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it. And I think that just reminded myself that just get up and do it. It really is that simple. It sucks some days, and some days you feel great. But it really is that simple. Just commit, and stay consistent, and you do whatever. Just like it, like anything else, man. But that, yeah, I came up with it just because I was like, what do I hate doing? I hate running, so let's do it every freaking day.
Yeah.
And then here we are, man, coming to the end. Now I'm thinking about another challenge, what I want to do next year.
That's what I was about to ask. What's the challenge for next year besides the
Oh man,
marathon?
I haven't decided yet, man. Because like one thing I have learned about run every day is you shouldn't run every day. You need to rest. you you need to let your body recover. I haven't done great with my diet. I started losing some muscle along the way, so I really was like, nope, can't do that. So I started eating more, which is fine. I just been trying to maintain all that excessive amounts of cardio, doing jujitsu, still lifting, all that stuff. Like you really learn that there isn't much room for alcohol when you do that either, because like that just fucks you up. But I didn't listen to that either. I'm still drinking beer, so it's but I haven't had a drop of alcohol. I'm in the middle of a 100-day no alcohol challenge right now. I think I'm on I don't even know. I lost count. It's 60 days, 60 some days right now, something like that. But yeah, doing 100 days, I feel that for people who are like thinking about quitting alcohol for just even if you just do like 30 days or a week, if you drink a lot, you know what I mean? I feel fantastic. Like the mental clarity and just I have more energy, blah blah blah. But breaks from alcohol are good, so that's helped a bunch. Uh, yeah, don't run every day. Like do it for a challenge for sure, but like recovery is super important. I've learned that. I'm 33 years old now too, so I've learned that like eating the proper stuff, getting sleep, and really trying to focus on recovery is the only way you can continue in this game. And like now trying to do like the goals I have later for maybe doing some real endurance stuff like a triathlon and maybe even one day doing an Ironman, like all that stuff. I weigh 220 pounds, bro. And like the only reason I've been able to maintain that is because I eat a shit ton while doing all this excessive cardio and lifting. You know what I mean? So like you have to figure all that out, but run every day hurts. I figured that out in the first 30 days, my knees and all that. And then my body adjusted. And then I've been pretty much pain free. Besides like the tweaks and injuries, especially you get your guard pass in jiu-jitsu, something like that, you get knee cut, my groin, like hamstring, whatever, get knee barred, my hamstrings fucked for a week, and then you still got to go run 3 miles, 5 miles, whatever it is, whatever's on the agenda for that day. But,
Yeah, Mario,
yeah, man.
since you're definitely not the typical runner's build, give people the height weight
Right.
because
Five.
I know you, but
Yeah. No, I'm built like a fire hydrant, bro. Yeah, I'm 5'8" and I'm sitting at about 220, maybe 225. Pretty stocky build. I'm not like ripped, but I'm not fat either. You know what I mean? But,
he's built like Maurice Jones-Drew out here running
yeah, there
every
you go.
day.
Pretty much, man. Yeah,
So.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, exactly. His legs might be a little bit bigger. That guy's got some ham hocks on him, dude. But yeah, pretty much, man.
All right, and so before we wrap it up, you kind of already gave us some hints as to what was coming in 2024, but what are you looking forward to most in the next year?
Oh man, I think just I'll separate in between in the like personal and business. Personal life, just really looking forward to continuing spending as much time as I can with my wife and my son. Being an entrepreneur has his own set of stresses, but I'm also able to be with my son every single day and my wife every single day. I'm able to navigate around those. Like I have time, which is our most valuable asset. You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to that, spending as much time with them. Hopefully, maybe trying for another child in 2024. We'll see.
Oh yeah,
Business, yeah, we're hoping so. We'll keep the family growing, but business wise, man, just continue growing my personal brand and then my apparel brand, right? Because like it all circles around each other. Trying to keep establishing my social media presence as best as I can, um, and just growing my real estate business, making that transition to 10/7 and learning some more things, um, expanding that, and then growing the Alpha Standard into hopefully something that I can really take massively one day. Maybe even getting into like a warehouse space. Probably 2025. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, things are moving smoothly. Things are moving quickly. So we'll see, man. But just growth, I would say, personal and professional.
for sure. And then one thing I definitely forgot to ask, which we've discussed personally, you and I, is how do you look back on your law enforcement career and do you ever miss it?
Oh man, yeah. Um, I look back and I'd say I'm extremely proud of it. I'm proud that I served in that capacity for the time that I did. I loved being a cop, man. I was one of those guys that my identity was in it. So when I left, there was a bit of an identity crisis for a few months that I didn't know who I was. Like I had some soul searching to do. I don't miss the day to day operations of the job. I do miss the locker room. I'll always miss the camaraderie, the locker room, all that because but it is replaceable if you find a new tribe. You really do, and then you find guys like other like-minded individuals, and you see that there is a lot more to life than just that job. And it took me a little bit to figure that out, but once I did, man, life has been very good, very good.
For sure. And then, Mike, did you have anything before I close it out?
No. Yeah, no. Yeah,
All right, and
everything was
then
great.
for
Awesome, dude,
sure.
man.
And so, Mario, where can people find you? Where can people connect with you?
Oh yeah, man. Facebook is just my name, Mario Santos. I'm on Instagram as well. At official Mario Santos is my tag. Um, and that's pretty much it for social media. Obviously, the Alpha Standard stuff too. That's me as well. So if anybody goes on there and you send us a DM, it's going to be me you're talking to for the time being, and I'll let people know that right off the rip. So you're actually talking to the guy who runs the place. So that way, that's kind of cool. You're not talking to somebody overseas, right? But yeah, I'm mainly on Instagram. I do Facebook stuff, but that's for like real estate is hyper local, so that's a lot of real estate stuff and just personal stuff. I'll post stuff about my wife, my son every now and again, stuff like that. But both of them are public pages. But yeah, mainly Instagram at official Mario Santos.
For sure. And then I noticed recently, because I've been following you for a while now, I noticed recently you got a blue check mark next to your name. So you're pretty big time
Yeah,
now.
yeah, old verified man. Yeah,
Yeah.
Meta, they love me. They didn't want to give it. They gave it to me. I'm trying. I'm still waiting to get my Instagram one. They took it away. Now they're going to give it back. And then they're giving me a hard time over the Alpha Standard. I'm like, come on. They want me to pay them for it, and I'm like, I'm not paying you for it. So that's what it is, man.
Just hold the line. All right. Well, we appreciate your time for sure and your flexibility with doing this virtually
Oh,
since we
dude,
had some
absolutely
some issues. But yeah, we appreciate it, and everybody, I'm sure, is going to be tuning in to what you got going on. So
awesome, man.
looking forward to to having you joining me and Mike at
Hell
Rio
yeah,
at the
dude.
10-7 project. So
Hell
it'll
yeah.
be a good time.
Thank you guys so
All right.
much for having me on, dude. I really appreciate it, man. It's been a blast.
Yeah, nice meeting you,
Yep.
Mario.
Pleasure,
All
brother.
right.
All right, boys.